Hello and welcome to tonight's lightning talk session. I'm Colin Dean and I'm going to be your host tonight. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. We've got still just a little bit of time for folks to spool in. We will be back with the real talks shortly. Figure out why OBS is not. Oh, technical fun. That's always a good time. We figure it out one way or another. We're cool with that. Learning community.
Me, I always mess up with the sound. I never know which parts of the sound are connected to other parts.
Yeah, I get you there. We had this crazy audio setup on my computer for Hard Effects because we had so many different audio channels with playing videos and some other things. It was pretty wild. And I didn't know what was playing. I was just like, John Schaefer, what am I doing? And he's like, just click A, click B, and you'll figure it out. I don't know, my first like brush with things that I had no idea what I was doing. We got it. We figured it out. Yeah, this looks really good on YouTube. One of the things that's transpired in the last month or so is that YouTube deprecated, and well, they deprecated it several years ago, but finally killed off YouTube Stream Classic, which was the just kind of dumb RTMP streaming thing that you could send video to. And now you have to use their YouTube events, or I think they call it YouTube Stream now. And it's a much better heads-up display, like a much better like experience for the producer. But it broke 8x8. Like 8x8 couldn't use it for a month, and they got it working last week. And I'm super happy to have that working. And now I can like see like a much better like thing to like do the YouTube thing.
Just in time for us. Thanks.
Just in time. But for those of you who are already around, I can talk a little bit about stuff that's been going on with Code and Supply. We are Code and Supply workspace is open. We've been following state of Pennsylvania recommended health protocols. We have people wearing masks. We've done 6-foot distancing on our desks. I think we have today. I think we hit a high of 5. It was our local high since the start of the pandemic. We had previously had about 12 people in daily. So we're slowly inching back up. But of course, Allegheny County is kind of still on a little bit of an uphill right now. But we're still alive. We're still, people are still coming in and enjoying the facility. And other things, we have a couple of talks that are coming up potentially in November. And then one that I'm probably going to do in December on equity compensation, along with Jess Nepkin. I'm trying to get that one back together. We started working on it last December and never really finished it because of the pandemic. And some other cool stuff. We've got one that's like in the works on Python iterators, one that's in the works on Svelte, the front end framework, and a few others. And if you want to speak for Code and Supply, I'm the person to talk to. You can talk to me on Slack. You can talk to me here. You can talk to me any way you want. The best place, though, to put in your desire to speak is codeandsupply.co/speak. And there's a form there you can fill out, and we will get a hold of you right quick about that. Most of the folks who are talking on tonight's Lightning Talk night have gone through that process. They've submitted there. In fact, one of our speakers kind of was the one who gave me a nudge to do Lightning Talk night because of submitting there, and he might tell you about it later. I'll let that up to him. All right, so it's 7 o'clock on the button. I am seeing myself in 4 places on my screen, and I think things are good. I think we're ready to get going. So, fixing one thing real quick, and going to go pull up my list to see who's up. Let's do a quick roll call to make sure that I've got everybody in here.
Do we get to make any sound we want again?
Yes. Just answering a quick message. All right. So as I do my roll call here, as Dean alluded, you can make any legitimate noise as long as I can hear you, and it's preferably G-rated. Then that is enough to signify that you're here. So let's do it. First up is Ruthan. Is Ruthan here?
I am here.
Great. Hello. Hima, are you here?
Hello. I'm here.
All right, cool. Jean, are you here?
Yay!
Hello. Matt McHenry, are you here? Excellent. Seth, are you online?
I am. Hello.
Hello. Jasmine, are you here? Hello, great. And Bruce Parr.
Yep.
Excellent. Cool. We've got everybody. All right. First up tonight on our Code and Supply Lightning Talk night is Ruthan Freese.
Woo! Hello, everybody. How are things? Hi. My name is Ruthan Freese. I usually live in Durham, North Carolina, where I'm a software engineer at Spreedly. I got in touch with the Code and Supply folks through abstractions 2 years ago and hard effects this year, and it is great to be with y'all. A thing that is near and dear to my heart is custom Slack emoji and what makes a good one. So that's what I'm going to be telling you about tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Yes. Entire screen. We're living dangerously. Clickety click, click, click. All right, so apparently my computer forgot that I told it that Firefox could see my screen. So rather than quitting, actually, hang on just a second. There we go. Can you see my screen?
We cannot.
Womp womp. I can see my screen. Weird.
All right.
Let's forego the slides for tonight, and I am just going to talk. And if anybody is super interested in the slides, which honestly are mostly notes for me.
I can see your screen.
Somebody's screen.
Oh, does it say Slackmoji?
Yes.
Nice. I love that. Cool.
We're not seeing it on the stream.
Interesting.
So maybe retoggle, or we can come back to you.
Last time I needed to leave the meeting and hop right back in, and then I could share my screen. Look.
Cool. I'll go ahead and try that, and I will be right back.
All right. Hima, are you ready?
I'm actually updating something right now. I need a few more minutes probably.
Okay. Jean, are you able to go now?
I can go now, but I've got a baby in my lap and it may interrupt my talking. We'll see.
It'll be cute.
Okay.
Maybe.
Ruthan, do you want to try sharing your screen again before I take over?
I can try sharing my screen again if we're ready to try that.
Yeah, go for it.
Slack emoji, Dropbox paper. Remember this decision. All right, how are we?
Hey, there we go.
Yay! Cool. I'm going to tell you about Slackmoji. Also, all of that stuff I already said. Yeah. So the first question is, when should I add a new Slackmoji? Honestly, this is kind of up to you. My favorite time to add one is in the context of like some running joke that I know I'm going to want to refer to later in a subtle way that's not me taking over the entire Threader channel and being like, remember that time when? You can just sneak a React-G in there and be like, remember that time when? I'm personally of the opinion that it is polite and good Slack etiquette to use existing React-G instead of creating new ones. It kind of just keeps the interface nicer for everyone. If, like me, you sometimes find that someone has named the React-G something inexplicable, you can always use the alias feature to name it something that you will remember. So the first thing you need to do is find a picture. You can crib one from another Slack you're already on, if there's one you like. Also, I will say I am not a lawyer, but as I understand it, using things that are publicly available as Slackmoji falls under fair use, which is to say that probably if somebody sues you for making a Slack React-G of something that's copyrighted, you'll be able to be like, it's fair use because of reasons, and you can read more about that if you'd like. One thing it is important to be aware of is that some React-G are more and less appropriate. This sometimes goes for things that might be suitable for a private Slack with your friends that aren't good for work. It's also important to be aware of whether we're making React-G that represent people from other races in maybe ways that aren't super great on the structural level. There's a really good article by Lauren Michelle Jackson that was actually published in Teen Vogue. If anyone isn't reading Teen Vogue, give it a check out, about digital blackface, and I encourage all of you to go read that if you'd like to learn more about it. So what are some qualities to look for in a picture that makes a good Slackmoji? The first, and in my opinion, most important thing is that it needs to be legible at small sizes. Regardless of what size the picture is to begin with, it's going to be displayed at maximum 32 pixels by 32 pixels, I think, which is not that big. It helps if the picture you're starting with is square or close to square, because Slack treats all React-G as if they were square. And it helps if the background is simple. That especially helps if you're going to need to cut out the background, which we'll talk about later. What are some examples of good Slack emoji? This is a good one that's very simple and easy to read. This is in my works Slack as a. You can see that it's there isn't a lot going on. It's only a few colors. It's only a few shapes. It's very easy to read even when it's small. One that is more detailed is everybody's favorite GIF of Homer coming out of the bushes rather than going into the bushes because of reasons. This one is pretty detailed, but even when it's small, it's pretty easy to tell what it is. Like it's a big bush with Homer coming out of it, so you know. This is an example of a thing that does not make a good Slack emoji. This is the picture that is the same hat React-G on a Slack I'm on. And it is from a cartoon that I can link you to at some point about two guys who are wearing the same hat who sort of have this moment of connection because they're wearing the same hat. It's a really interesting cartoon, but this is already not super intelligible at the size it is. And when it gets shrunk down, it's like Those are definitely some grainy lines that I can't identify at all unless I hover over it to see what it is. So the first thing you need to do when you're finding a picture to turn into a Slack emoji is to probably crop it. What this means is that if you have, like, for instance, an image that's like 450 pixels by 450 pixels, Slack will resize it for you, but it won't do anything very smart with the contents. If you resize your 450 pixel image down to like 32 pixels, and the content is only taking up a third of it in the first place, that only leaves you with like 10 pixels of content, which, again, not going to be super legible. So go ahead and crop out any parts of the picture that aren't relevant to what you're trying to express. The next thing to do is to trim out the background if it has one. This was not a thing I gave any thought to until Slack rolled out dark mode and people started complaining about not being able to tell what emoji even were. But it's not entirely necessary, but it's nice if you can manage it. The preview app on OS X has a nice little editing tool that's like a magic wand. You can just sort of like magic wand the background, hit delete and get rid of it, and then you'll have a nice transparentized picture that you can put into Slack. Another thing to be aware of is having things in the GIF that you're using that are either black or white. Usually, if you're in dark mode, the background is black or close to black. If you're in light mode, the background is white. So anything that is only those colors will just totally disappear depending on what mode people are in. One app to be aware of if you are not on a Mac or don't want to use preview is Pixlr, which is an online editor that has a lot of the features you will need to crop, trim a background, and recolor. It also has a special app that does a very good job of removing backgrounds, in my opinion. I haven't tested it extensively, but I've done a couple on it, and I've been really impressed. And I can pop a link to that in the Code and Supply Slack if anybody can't find it or whatever. And I think that's the end of my talk. Does anybody have any questions? I haven't been looking at the time, but maybe we can give it like 30 seconds.
No, I think
I have.
that's it. Oh, go. We've got one question. Go for it.
Yeah, I was just trying to find my mute button. So, what format are the images in? And I'm assuming it's probably something bitmap-ish that would give that background.
So if you're using preview will convert any image, pretty much any image, into a GIF or a PNG, both of which Slack accepts. I don't actually know about bitmaps. I don't know that I've seen one in the last several years, but it might work.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Cool. Great.
Cool.
Thank you very much, Ruthan.
Thanks, everybody. Go forth and make React-G.
Yee. All right. Let's see. Next up is Hima again.
Yep, I'm ready.
All right. Hima.
All right.
Have at it.
Okay, great. Hey, everyone. My name is Hima, and I've been working on a project for the past 2 months or so, which basically lets you record websites as if they were screen recordings. So I'm going to send you a demo very soon, but first, if you try to ever make a normal screen recording on your computer, the output file is an MP4 or some kind of video file. And what's happening is that you're recording the actual pixels on the screen, and those are getting compressed and then saved, and then you can watch them again. What we've actually made, me and a friend with Capsule, is what we call it, is a way to record websites directly from the HTML in the page itself. So before I say anything further, I'm just going to send you a demo right here in the chat. So if you go to that URL, you'll see a demo of Trello on your computer. And there's a timer at the top. It's about 40 seconds. So I'm just going to wait until you've all been able to experience that for about 40 seconds. Okay, I think that's probably near the end of the recording for most of you. Okay, so now if you look at that recording, what most of you may assume is that that's it. But again, like I mentioned before, this is not a real video. It's not pixels that are recorded, it's the actual HTML on the page itself. So if you try using your mouse inside the video, you might see some things. For example, clicking actually works inside this video. Scrolling also works. So I'll give you guys a few seconds just to play around with it. And so basically, what's happening here is that this video is not a real video. It's actually just a website. And that's why everything is interactive on the website itself directly. And so now I'm going to go into sort of how this is possible, because I have not seen it before, really, and before we made this thing ourselves. So here we go. Let me share my screen. Okay. I assume you guys can see my screen. So I'm going to present little slides I have here. So yeah, it's called Capsule. And first, I'm going to go into some of the uses of Capsule beyond what you've seen from that quick demo so far. So one thing is that Capsule is just a Chrome extension. So I'm able to capture any website on the internet pretty much, and then just share it with you. So it's good for sharing any website. It's also really useful for me personally as a developer for just sharing localhost sites. I can actually just deploy, in quotes, any local development site and just share with anyone instantly and publicly on a Capsule link. Other use cases are recording bugs, saving pages on the internet, because again, say for example, a page on the internet goes down at some point, the one you save on Capsule will always continue to be there, as long as Capsule is still up, of course. And the last one as well is just sharing feedback on websites more easily as well. You're able to just record your entire mouse clicks and mouse movements in the website itself. So actually, before I go further, let me just actually do a live demo to show you what Capsule actually looks like. So here, I was looking at some monkeys earlier today, and I'm gonna actually record using Capsule like this page. So here's the Capsule extension. Again, it's a Chrome extension that we built that has the functionality built in. So there are two buttons here, screenshot or start recording. The link I sent you for Trello earlier was a recording. A screenshot is simpler. It's just a live capture or a single capture of the page itself. So here, for example, it says screenshot, and on this page, I'm able to scroll like a normal web page, like click on stuff here, etc. But this is totally independent of Google. If Google went down right now, this page would still work because the entire contents of this website of this page were captured in this Capsule. Now, the more interesting thing, though, are the recordings. So I press start recording, and now everything I'm doing on this page, on this website, is being recorded. So these scrollings, these mouse movements. If I go to a new page, you see the URL has changed, and these images now appear. All of this is also being recorded. So I'm going to just end it there. When I press finish, processes, and then I get a new tab instantly with this unique link. And so here you can see the exact thing I just created 16 seconds ago. And you can see here when I went to the new tab, it loads the new tab here. And so yeah, so that's basically how you make a Capsule. And it's quite simple. Again, it's just this quick Chrome extension, 2 buttons. It's the simplest way to record anything, really. And so yeah, so I hope that gives you a good insight into what the output of Capsule looks like, and also how to make a Capsule. So now the interesting thing, as well, so like I mentioned before, right, this is just a website. So for example, I'm actually able to just inspect the page and see the actual HTML in the page itself. So anytime in the video, I'm able to just open this console up, like your DevTools in your browser, like normal. So yeah, this is pretty much what Capsule enables. So now for the rest of the talk, I'm just going to go into how this is even possible in the first place. So for a high-level overview, there are basically 3 parts to this. One is the Chrome extension, which records everything, and it sends the data to a backend and a database. And then when you open a Capsule link, like in the front end, we play back the actual content, the changes on the page, to create the video effect. So I'm just going to go into each of these 3 parts pretty quickly and just explain all of them. So for the front end, the extension recording, that's the most interesting part. Basically, A good amount of the changes that are being observed on the web page are done via this thing called the mutation observer. It's built into the browser, and there's a standard specification for it. And the mutation observer API lets us do things like track changes to the DOM itself. So if any elements get added or removed or changed, we get notified via a listener and a callback. And we then save those changes and then send those changes to our database. There are other things, though, that the mutation observer does not do, such as input changes, mouse movements, scroll listeners, things like that, which we had to add in additionally. And on the back end, there's a bunch of things happening there. First of all, we're storing the documents or the web pages along with a sequence of the changes on that page. So the sequence of changes would include the mouse movements, the new elements that are added or removed, etc. But there are a bunch of things we have to do, though, to the incoming HTML, like removing script tags. So one thing that I actually didn't explain yet was that all JavaScript is disabled on Capsule replays. And this is mainly just due to security, because we don't want any backend calls happening to the original website, because that might break stuff while you're viewing it and such. So it's just a security reason for that. So that's why we remove all the JavaScript script tags, do things like convert URLs to absolute URLs so they don't break when you view them on a Capsule, and a bunch more that I won't go into, but I can. And then all of these things, so the HTML, the CSS, and the fonts are all stored in our S3 storage, along with some other metadata. And then finally, when you're viewing a Capsule, I got those URLs I sent you. What's happening is that we're just loading up the original HTML, the base HTML of the page, along with an array of changes to that page. And then we apply those changes one by one, which creates this video effect that you're seeing. So basically, building Capsule was a pretty big ordeal, actually, because this was not simple, as you might imagine. There were a bunch of issues, especially with how huge the HTML spec is. And so, for example, one thing initially is that we were just sending the raw, extracting the raw CSS documents that were linked inside an HTML page. But we soon encountered many websites where they were dynamically generating CSS. And so we then had to actually send the local CSS directly using JavaScript to our backend instead of sending the original links to the external CSS. There are other issues like iframes, which have a bunch of things along with those. And so we had to actually add extra listeners for every iframe on page, because iframes have their own entire context pretty much. So a scroll listener on the main page will not work inside an iframe. And there are a bunch of other issues with canvases and base tags as well that probably don't have time for right now. But yeah, so that's it. Basically, Capsule is a project that we've been working on to just make a useful tool to capture stuff on the internet. Me and my partner have been using this all the time just for sharing local development builds ourselves with each other. I literally just make a website, press the Capsule screenshot button, and I can instantly share that with him, add a link. So yeah, feel free to use Capsule. I'll post the link to the Chrome extension in the chat soon after this. It's totally free to use, and you can use it for any personal reasons you want. So any questions? Oh, we have one question. Oh, I'm still sharing. So we have one question about storage mechanisms. Right now, everything is actually just stored in S3 plus a Postgres database. So the Postgres database stores things like which documents are linked to which other documents and which changes are linked to the document. But the actual assets in terms of the CSS or font files, those are stored in S3. Yes, we definitely thought about recording audio as well. I think that's a pretty useful thing to do. Haven't added it yet, but we do plan to add audio recording too. Question on Capsule taking up a lot of space. So one really cool thing about Capsule is that it's actually about 7 to 12 times smaller in file size than, of course, the same length. And so the cool thing is that if with a normal video, right, you're storing pixels. With Capsule, it's just all text that's being stored. And so text is super lightweight. The text here being just HTML or CSS text. So no, it takes up very minimal space, which is great. Also, the other really cool thing is that there's no compression happening, right? Because with a video file, you might, if you've ever recently seen those YouTube videos of people recording their screens years ago, it'd be 480 pixels. You can't see anything on the screen. With Capsule recordings, though, it's always pixel perfect because it's actually reproducing the entire HTML right in your browser. Question on how long they persist. They're, I guess, theoretically infinite, as long as our servers are up. But yeah, it's pretty much a permalink, though. So you can just share those, create one and share them. Here, for example, is a link to a localhost Jupyter notebook. So this is an example of a localhost capture. So all the assets are sent from localhost to our server, and then you can just view them wherever. The question on, are they person dependent? Oh yeah. So I guess for this question, Capsule records whatever on your screen. So if I'm logged into my Google account, you would see whatever details are there. If I'm logged into my Facebook and I take a capsule, like the content there would be there. But again, like because we've disabled all JavaScript, don't worry about sharing your Facebook pages because no one will be able to post on your behalf. Because again, all the JavaScript is disabled, so no need to worry about that.
Very cool. Thank you very much, Emma. That was really, really awesome. You were the one who kind of spurred me to get this lightning talk session going, and I'm amazed by this technology. It's really cool. It's a really awesome way to record things, and I'm sure that folks are going to catch it on. That's why I wanted to show it to our group. So thank you very much for presenting.
Thank you.
Next up on tonight's lightning talk night is none other than Jean Lange.
Hey, it's me. All right. I'm going to share my screen and see if it works. Did it work?
Yep.
All right. Sweet. I'll stop showing you that in a second as soon as I turn on my camera. Okay, cool. All right. Can you see my slides? I can't see your faces, so you have to give me audio feedback. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes? Sweet. Yes. All right. Thank you very much. Hello, friends. I'm here today to talk about Code Retreat. What is it? Why should you be interested? And specifically, why am I talking about it now? I'll tell you, coming up on Saturday, November 7th, it is an event that will be taking place over many hours. It's a free event. It's a virtual event, so you'll sign on from home or from wherever you are with your computer. And although often at Code Retreats, these are things that happen regularly, you would be provided with a lunch. This time you have to provide your own lunch, but you can have whatever you want to have for lunch. So that could be viewed as a perk. And not only is this an event happening here in Pittsburgh, hosted by Code and Supply by our very own Jenny Manning, but also it's a sibling event to a whole bunch of similar events that will be going on worldwide during the same weekend. So there's this upcoming event. What is it? Why should you care? Why should you spend 6 hours of your Saturday on a computer after having already spent the week on the computer? Let's talk about it. So practicing, right? There are lots of realms where you do practice to improve specific parts of the skill so you can do the whole thing better. One classic example is in karate or another martial art, where you might do a kata, a set of forms, where it's not useful. It's not something you'll ever actually have to do. It's an exercise that focuses your practice to work things into your muscle memory so that you're better at doing the real things you need to do. This also happens in other things that use your body to create. In ballet dancing, you do bar exercises, which aren't things you're really going to do in a real dance. In drawing, you might do warm-up exercises to get your hands steady and ready to go. And code too, writing code is one of these skills where there is a lot of useful practice that can be done, but we don't often have time for it in our daily coding life at work. So what Code Retreat is a time set aside for focused practice on code. And you're freed from one of the normal constraints you have while you're coding, that of like getting something done. You in fact will walk out of the day with absolutely no code because you will frequently delete the code that you write. Instead, what you're supposed to be doing is practicing, is having some fun playing with what you are working with, exploring some constraints. So, in drawing warm-up, you might just be drawing circles to get better at making that curve and making it even, different sizes, different shapes of lines, right? But at Code Retreat, you might practice things like, what if I do TDD as purely as possible? What if I never write a method that is longer than 4 lines? What if I don't have access to if? Can I still complete this problem? And so you do these exercises that aren't things you would probably do in real life, but allow you to see what their consequence is and take those skills and those beliefs that you build up from that back into your daily life of coding to get better at it. That's the idea behind Code Retreat. So what happens at a Code Retreat? The way it works is that Code Retreat comes in cycles. This Code Retreat, we're planning on trying to do 4 of them. But each cycle is a 45-minute or however many minutes that Code Retreat decides, a session of working on the same problem the whole time. So you're never changing problems. Each time you start over, you're going to be starting over on the same problem. So one of those sessions that you repeat goes like this. First, you find a new partner. Code Retreat is done in pairs because one of the things that the creators of it believe is that learning is best done with someone else, not by yourself. A lot of Code Retreat is talking together and learning from each other and with each other and by reflecting together. So you start off by finding a new partner. You're going to switch partners every time. You will get a constraint for this round. Maybe the constraint will be you are an evil programmer and you will only fulfill exactly what the specification says and no further and no more, and explore what happens. You and your partner will work together following that constraint that you've just been given. And that's the part, that step 3 is the part that takes the longest during each cycle of Code Retreat. At the end of that time, when the timer goes off, you will delete your code because producing code is not the point. The point is practicing that skill. And then the entire group gets back together and discusses what happens. There's a brief retrospective at the end of each cycle and then sort of a larger one at the end of the day. The problem that gets worked on at Code Retreat is called Conway's Game of Life. And here's an intriguing visual from it. I'm not going to tell you a lot about the problem right now, but you get to work with these cells that have certain rules about how they come alive and die off. And when they build together, you get to create these beautiful patterns flickering on your screen. All right, some questions that I think you perhaps might have. First of all, is Code Retreat scary? Yes, it is scary. You are going in front of a whole bunch of strangers who you've never worked before, and you are exposing to them all your vulnerable insides and unsureness about how to start this problem and how to do what's going next. Also, it's awesome for the exact same reasons. I've gone to a couple of Code Retreats. You come out of them tired. You come out of them, having done a lot of hard work, but also having learned a lot of things and really meaningfully connected with the other people there. And my experience is also that people who go to Code Retreats think about them in their work, in their programming for the next couple of weeks at least. All right, another question. Am I too new to programming to do this? Absolutely not. Anyone can come to Code Retreat. It doesn't matter how long you've been programming for, whether that's a very short time or a very long time. Part of the joy of having pairs there is that you and your partner are working together, and you can seek out people to pair with who have a complementary level of experience to you. And if you end up paired together with someone else who has no clue what's going on, that's cool too. You can hop in and join another pair and hang out together and learn during the day. There's always something to learn from Code Retreat, no matter how experienced you are, whether it's very little or very lot. How should you prepare yourself for Code Retreat? There are 2 things that I would suggest. The first one is to get your computer set up a little bit before you come. You want to be able to write and run some code in the language of your choosing. And you also want to be able to write and run a test in that language. There are lots of resources online for helping with this, including from the event page. If you go to Meetup and search for Code and Supply Code Retreat, you'll find that. Second thing you should do to prepare is get familiar with the game of life. Knowing a little bit about the problem beforehand will help you in thinking about it when you go into starting on that day. That's not a required step, but I think it could help you. Yeah, why would you do it? Well, because it's awesome. It's a great way to connect with the other people who are there. It teaches valuable lessons that you can take back with you in your life. everyone I've talked to who has gone to a code retreat has found it to be a valuable way to spend many hours of their day. All right, so there's this event. It's coming up. I hope to see some of you there. If you're looking for more information, I'll post these slides into Code and Supply Slack so you can find them and these links. I am always happy to talk to you about this and tell you more information about it. Also, there are some websites you can go look at for that. Thank you very much.
Cool, great, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Jean? Got time for just
I love questions.
I know that Jean loves questions. I asked Jean a lot of questions. All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Great. Cool. All right, next up is on our Lightning Talk night.
Wait, Colin, wait, there's a question.
At the buzzer.
Do you screen share with your partner or what? So yeah, for the virtual event, we'll be using Zoom breakout meeting rooms, and you will be screen sharing with your partner, with both of you able to control the screen.
Yeah, Jenny and I were talking about potential technology to do that, and I think we've got our hands on something that's going to work pretty well. We'll see how it works over the next couple of days as we're trying it out. Cool. All right. Next up on Lightning Talk night is Matt McHenry. Matt, are you ready to go? Matt, you are muted. We do see your screen though.
Yes, I'm ready to go.
All right. You're up.
All right. So I love a good tool. And when I find one, I like to tell people about it because good tools make my life easier at work, and I hope they can make your life easier too. So the tools that I want to tell you about tonight are tools for dealing with everybody's favorite data interchange format, JSON, JavaScript object notation. Pretty much all of us probably have encountered it in our work lives, and many of us probably see it on our screens all day long, every day. So I had to pick a sample JSON document to take a look at. And what I did was I captured a HAR file. HAR stands for HTTP archive. It's something you can grab from your browser development tools that records every single HTTP request and response that occur during your browser session. So I simply visited the Code and Supply homepage and captured a HAR file from it. So the first tool that I want to show you is a tool called the JSON Incremental Digger. And this tool works like most command line tools do by receiving input on a pipe. You can just cat a file into it. You can run a program that produces JSON, whatever you want. When you run this program, it'll pretty print the JSON for you and show you the first several lines of it that fit on your screen. And you can start, as the name implies, you can start digging around. So the first thing that you will probably want to do is hit the tab key a couple of times, and you can see that this top level document only has a single entry in it called .log. But then nested in here, there's a document that has 4 entries called creator, entries, pages, and version. And I can continue using the tab key and the enter key to dig down into this. The entries object is an array. So then I can give an index into that array. Let's just pick the first element. And again, I can keep kind of digging my way down into the structure of this document. So you can see that the entry element in the array has several keys that have to do with HTTP requests. In this case, I'm going to take a look at the request key again, just hit enter, dig down in there, another dot, and I can keep on hitting tab and dig my way all the way down, in this case, to a leaf value, which is the URL that I requested, that was requested in the very first HTTP transaction. So I'm going to grab that expression and exit out of JID and switch over and show you the other tool. I'll is called JQ. I can use that exact same expression with JQ to pull out that exact same value. But JQ has a lot more power. So one of the first things that you might want to do is, well, what were all of the URLs that were requested? So if you remove the index and just give this a open close square brace, you will get a stream of values. These are all of the URLs that were requested when I loaded the Code and Supply homepage. And so one thing you might want to do is say, well, how many of those are there? So JQ, just like the Unix command line, has a notion of piping. So I can take this stream of values that comes out of this expression and pipe them into a function. So this is not I'm not asking for the length property with a dot. This is a function called length. And so this is a way that you can see how many URLs, but what the hell, this is not the length of that list of URLs. In fact, what's happening here is that this length function has been applied to each individual value that's coming out of this stream of values. So this is analogous to a stream in Java or an observable in JavaScript. Many languages, many functional programming paradigm languages have this kind of a notion of a stream that you can map functions over. So what I've actually done here is I've gotten the length of the first URL and then the length of the second one and so on. So what I need to do is I need to tell JQ, could you please take that stream of values that comes out of this expression and make an array out of it? So I just simply put square brackets around it, and that will give me an array, and then the array will get piped into the length function, and it will do what I expect it to. The next thing I might want to do is I might be curious, well, geez, there's a lot of different domain names in here. As with any modern website, the website is built by bringing together lots of different assets from different domains. So I might be interested in, how many of these requests actually went to the Code and Supply domain. So I can use the select function and the starts with function to filter this stream of strings down to just the ones that are from the Code and Supply domain. And again, if I would like JQ to count those for me, I can make an array out of it and pipe it to the length function. So we can see that 12 out of the 51 HTTP requests were actually interacting with the Code and Supply domain. All right, so the next thing that you might want to do is, what if I want to see those requests? I want to see some more information about them, not just the URL, but I want to see the whole request. So I can actually pluck this this .url accessor off of the incoming stream, and I can bury that inside the select function. So I want to see if the URL starts with Code and Supply, but I want to apply that not to the URLs. I want to apply that to the entire request object. So I'm kind of stepping out a level in the JSON document. And when I do that, indeed, I get a list of all of the requests. And so I'm going to, let me grab the next command here. So I'm going to do a similar thing and actually step up another level and grab the entire entry and stream that into a select. And I'm going to see, are there any requests that look like they sent back some JSON? And indeed, there is one. And you can see right here, there is some JSON there. So I can actually drill down into that request. One of the things I can do before I do that is there's a keys function that works similarly to hitting the tab key in JID if I want to just get a sense of the structure of that this one entry that I've picked out here with the select. What are the top level keys in there, and then I can write another accessor expression here to pick out the response and its content. Pick out the text here, and I've drilled my way down into this embedded piece of JSON. And now you might worry that you might have to throw up your hands and try to figure out how to dump this into a temporary file so that I can work with it. But don't worry, JQ has you covered. You can use another function called from.json to actually parse that into a new JSON document, and then you can just continue working. Let's say you wanted to get the second icon. You can pull that out and just keep on going as usual. So that's very cool. The other thing that you can do is you can actually build up JSON objects by picking apart the JSON that you've got coming in and reconfiguring it. So if I wanted to create a new object around this piece of JSON that I pulled out of the HTTP request, I can do that. I can say I would like a new object, just like I used the square bracket to make an array. I can use the curly brace to make a new object, and I just give it the key I want, and then I give it an expression that will produce the value I want to assign to that key. If I can keep doing this, I can, for example, say, could you give me a little summary here of the URL that was requested, which is going to come from the surrounding request URL, and what method did we use, and what JSON did we get back. So that gives me a nice summary of I requested this URL with a get method. I got back this JSON. So that is a quick tour of some cool things you can do with JQ. The last one is you can actually use JQ to generate a JSON document basically from the empty object. So there are functions that will produce values, and then you can pipe those through more JSON expressions, JQ expressions. So you can do things like this to produce new JSON documents from scratch using different programming techniques. And then and that's about all I wanted to show. So just want to encourage you, next time you have a little problem involving JSON, you need to pull some data out of it, you need to mess around with it in some way, give JQ a try. It's a very powerful tool. And I am still learning about it. It has a very extensive man page. It has there's some nice questions and answers about it on Stack Overflow, but yeah, that's basically what I wanted to show. The two tools that I showed have home pages on GitHub here, so feel free to check them out. And thanks for listening. Any questions from anybody?
Any questions out there? Either in 8x8 or in YouTube. I'll ferry them across the river internet. All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much again, Matt. It was very great. I know that I love JQ and use JQ a ton for everything, and I'm glad that you're sharing it. Next up on our talk list for tonight is Seth Peasley. Seth, are you there?
Hello, I'm here.
All right, you're up.
All right, so let me share my screen. I tried this yesterday. We'll see if it works. All right. And then,
All right, we see something.
all right. Hi, so I'm Seth Peasley, pronouns he, him, and I just wanted to give a brief overview, not even an introduction necessarily, just an overview of Blazor, which is a technology I've been learning some about because I don't know a lot about web stuff. It's an area I need to get more acquainted with. So to talk about it, Microsoft has a bad habit of naming things, lots of different things. And so there's a number of different historical terms that are technologies that they used to do, but they aren't doing anymore, like ASP.NET Web Forms, MVC, Web API. What they've been moving towards is things with a word core on them. And the idea is to align with the .NET Core framework that they've, I shouldn't say framework or technology platform, which is their new sort of focus, which is a sort of cross-platform. It's very cool. This is a Linux box, and I can write .NET C# on it, which is really neat. So the things that now the web technologies are MVC Core, Razor Core, Blazor Core, things like that with the word core after them. So you might have a more of a traditional web page where you have more of a static interface where you're just displaying text, not necessarily a lot of interactive requirements. You might need to run without JavaScript, or your development team is unfamiliar with JavaScript, like I am. I don't know anything about JavaScript, and frankly, it scares me a little bit. So that's a situation where you might use a more traditional web app approach. If you have something that is a little more complex or requires more interaction from the user, that is a place where you could use a single page app, which is what Blazor is designed for. If you have developers who already know a little bit of JavaScript or can use Blazor WebAssembly, or if you have applications that need to expose an API, these are all places where Blazor is more appropriate for web page design. So Blazor apps are based on this idea of a component, and a component is basically any UI element, so page, the whole page, or user interface dialog, data entry form, all these things. And the components are actually just C# classes. So they handle the UI, they handle user events, and because they're classes, you can package them for internal use in other projects within your own system, or you can package them as NuGet. NuGet is the .NET ecosystem's sort of package sharing thing, kind of like NPM. So the Blazor components usually will have a Razor file extension. Razor allows the developer to combine HTML and C# on the same document, which they call Razor components. And then the Razor components are rendered in memory into the DOM, the document object model. Blazor can also be used to compile to WebAssembly, which is some other folks, Code and Supply, have talked about WebAssembly a little bit. It sounds really cool. And basically, it downloads the whole, like a whole .NET runtime into the web page, and it allows it to run in the web page, and allows you to have also interoperability with JavaScript and do lots of cool things. Something I'm gonna probably play around with some more. And this is a brief example of kind of what like a Blazor or Razor page might look like. You have your HTML markup with the message and the button class, and then you have the C# code that actually handles the event, increments the counter, and allows the HTML to display. And here are some sources that I used, just because I like to cite where I got stuff from. And that is my presentation. Does anyone have any questions? I don't know that I could answer them, but I'll try.
Any questions out there? Anything on YouTube? give it a second. I know the C# community doesn't get a whole lot of attention in the Code and Supply community, so I'm really happy to have a little bit of C# content. So thank you very much for presenting that.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. I think we will move on now. Our next speaker tonight is Jasmine Davis. Jasmine, are you there?
Yes, here I am. Let me get my screen shared. Okay, get ready to stare into the void for a second. Okay. Hopefully that wasn't too terrible. So, hello, boys and girls and friends beyond the binary. My name is Jasmine Davis, pronoun she, her. I am a student at Academy Pittsburgh. It's a 12-week programming boot camp in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, I can't see everybody while I'm talking, but just before we kind of jump in, I just want to know, how do we sort of feel about video calls? Are we like really excited about them, or like maybe not a fan? You can say out loud, or maybe just kind of think in your own heart and sort of know your own feelings. So, did I hear somebody with an opinion about video calls?
I definitely am not a big fan of them when I, haven't gotten a shower yet that morning.
Yes. So one of the things about Academy this session is that we have been on video calls for the past 6 weeks straight. So that's about 250 hours of video call. And I am like so there with you. I hated being on camera. I was really self-conscious about it at first. But over those 250 hours on camera, we learned a lot of things as a group that helped us really learn and collaborate together. And so I wanted to share some of those things that I've learned. So because we started totally remotely and we were never really able to be together in one place, it did take us some time to learn how to use these remote platforms, and especially video conferencing. We use Zoom. So we have both big and small groups in Zoom. And I just wanted to share some of the things that our group of 25 students has learned to work on together. So if we're in a big group, we might all be in like a conference room or a classroom. I don't know if anybody even remembers what a conference room is, but if we were in a big group, we would all be together like that. Our big group is 25 to 30 people, but we actually all participate in our big group conversations. And these are some of the things that have worked for us in that bigger group. So the first thing you often hear is to leave your camera on, which can feel really unnecessary if you, say, haven't showered, or maybe you're in a bigger group and you think, who cares if I specifically have my camera on? But that was actually really key for our groups. Just to be able to see reactions and to communicate and collaborate with one another. So the other tips on this list are all sort of predicated on keeping your cameras on when you're in that meeting. So we have a quick communication system for quick questions that's visual. Because only one person at a time can really be talking in Zoom. If you have just a quick yes or no question, it can be hard to get that answer from everybody in class. So we use thumbs up, thumbs down a lot in class. Sometimes we'll do numbers 1 through 5. I've also seen some ASL used. But it's really important to decide as a group that visual communication system. So thumbs has been really great for us. It can also help to decide as a group how you're going to indicate how you want to actually talk. So if you want to say something out loud, you might want to raise your hand toward the camera or type a question in your text chat and have a moderator call out. And then if you're in person, if you ask a question, people can kind of hear and process that question at the same time. But if you're asking a question of a bigger group, you'll want to give like a lot more time for those answers, to let the group hear your voice, think about the question, think about how they want to indicate they want to respond, and then get ready to respond. So that might even feel a little uncomfortable to leave that long amount of time, but it's worth doing. If you're participating in the bigger group, you'll mostly want to stay muted, but you'll want to know how to unmute yourself really quickly and be ready to go off mute if you're ready to answer a question. So as you're kind of raising your hand to answer the question, you'll also want to prepare yourself to go off mute. And then finally, in a bigger group, think about having a text chat alongside your video chat. And that's something that's been really cool to see tonight here as well, with questions coming in over that text chat. It really lets you take advantage of being online, so you can do things like share links, which we saw here tonight. It also lets people react to things that were said out loud, but maybe the conversation has moved on, but they want to add an additional thought, and that gives them a good venue for that, so that the conversation can continue. So if you're in a smaller group, maybe 5 or 6 people, in person, we might be gathered around a whiteboard or around a computer. And remotely, this translated into breakout rooms in Zoom for our groups. So in these smaller groups, it's okay to unmute and sort of have a little bit of a natural conversation. But if you've ever tried to talk at the same time as somebody else, you know how hard that can be. You go, no, you go, no, you. So it can help to sort of cover your mouth physically with your hand if you're on camera, so that people can see that you're ceding the floor. And if you're providing the next thought, if you want to sort of move the conversation forward, and the person who's currently talking wants to add more to the same thought, it's just kind of kind to cede the floor to them, since it's a lot harder to come back around to a topic when you're remote. And if what you wanted to say gets sort of lost in the shuffle, that's another great reason to have a text chat, in addition to your video call, because it can function like a parking lot. Something else that was super duper helpful for us was screen sharing and then annotating. So we use Zoom's annotate feature extensively. Zoom also has a whiteboard built in. And it also gives you a little tool that lets you see where you are on the screen. So everybody gets a little arrow and you can point and show where you are. So all of that has been extremely helpful for us. And then you want to communicate really clearly and with more information than you might say in person. So, we'll say things like specific lines of code or putting a specific resource in our group's text chat. So we're, we're not just saying, oh, that if statement. We're saying the if statement on line 57, and we'll point at it at the same time, just to give more opportunities for us to sort of see where we're at together. And finally, socializing via Zoom. So kind of getting to know each other as a group. It's really hard to do that naturally when you're in a situation where only one person can be talking at the same time. So because you're kind of talking one person at a time, having that kind of natural get to know you conversation was really tricky at first. But something that we tried that I thought was super helpful to get us talking as a group was to have a group whiteboard drawing on Zoom. It let us bring everybody into that group. And it gave a lot of different ways to participate. So people could draw if they like to draw, they could type if they wanted to type. And because we had that video chat going on at the same time, we could just kind of talk about it out loud. So what we did is we would put our question up on the whiteboard and then sort of say how to participate. So this is one of our whiteboard drawings, and you can see people kind of reacting to things that other people have said. And it was really, it's really a lot of fun, and it sort of helped us bond as a group to talk about the things that we like to snack on this day, but we've done a bunch of them. So basically, when you're working together remotely, it's really, really different than it would be in person. You don't get the same kinds of feedback, and you can't really communicate in exactly the same way. But by intentionally trying some different ways of interacting with one another, and by sort of practicing these specific ways of communicating with one another, it's really helped us to collaborate as a group and to learn together. All right, thank you so much.
Cool. We do have a couple questions if you have time for a question or two.
Yeah, of course.
Cool. So one person from YouTube asked, how do you know when to start talking in a group of 30 people online at the same time?
Yeah. So actually, let me see if I can get my... I'm not going to be able to get my camera up. If you raise your hand, you can raise it toward the camera. So like in a classroom, you might raise your hand above your head. Instead, kind of cheat it toward where your webcam is, and raise your hand at the camera to really say, hey, I'm ready to talk. It also helped us to have a facilitator to sort of call on people or pass the conversation around.
Cool. And then Matt McHenry asks, was the virtual whiteboard built into your video conference tool, or did you use a third-party website?
So we have tried a couple of different options. Zoom has a built-in whiteboard. It's easy because it's right there and everybody can kind of use it natively in Zoom. But we've actually also been doing a lot with Google Draw, which gives you some more kind of code-friendly options for diagramming things. So whereas in Zoom, you have to kind of hand draw everything, Google Draw gives you like brackets and stuff that are helpful for flowcharts. Those are the two we've tried.
Cool. And then we've got one more question. How do you do visual signals if you can't see everyone at once, like if you're on mobile?
So most of my experience has been on desktop, I'll be honest. So being able to have the tile view where I can see everybody is really nice. I would recommend, again, like possibly having a facilitator who can see everybody or can at least see most people on one screen and can maybe flip through as needed to sort of call on people and help moderate that.
Cool. All right, Jasmine, thank you very much. That was great.
Thanks so much.
And for our last talk for this evening, we have Bruce Parr. Bruce, are you ready to go?
I am.
All right, Bruce, you are up.
All right, greetings, everybody. Let me get my slide deck up here. Cool. I can see it. Hopefully everyone else can see it. Awesome. All right, so what I'm going to talk about here is DevSecOps, and this is a proof of concept called our risk advisory framework. DevSecOps, kind of a newish term for those who aren't familiar with it. It's basically a security term, hence the sec. And our interaction with the development community within our company, hence the dev, and ops in terms of how we automate things in order to help our dev community achieve security. So what this is, the risk advisory framework, is basically, like I said on the screen here, it's a new twist on our old theme. So quickly about me, we'll get past this real quick. I've been at this a really long time, 20 years of software, 5 years of Paylocity. And I'm old enough to remember when cyberbullying was playing 52 card pickup with a classmate stack of punch cards. So anyway, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at Bruber, which is my nickname because I drive my wife to and from happy hours on CNS Slack. So enough about me. Let's talk about, oh yeah, and I've seen it and covered it. Forgot about that. Before we show the application, let's talk about what companies used to do. Some still do. No security whatsoever, or no security training whatsoever for their development or testing staff. Basically a gamble. The devs build software, they toss it over the fence, and teams get notified when the security team tests it, finds defects, and it goes onto their tech debt board, and maybe they'll get around to it at some point. And it's pretty typical, scarily. Most larger companies are making a lot of improvement. So what a lot of companies are doing is they're moving from the no training to single training to periodic training. So their engineers and test engineers get, training periodically, maybe annually, maybe semi-annually. And some actually get to the point where they teach their staff the basics of security testing. And the reason why they do that is security resources are very scarce and subsequently very expensive. And in a lot of respects, it's easier to teach your engineering staff and your testing staff how to do the basics so that you actually do it before it gets out into the wild. But we still have the same problem. So the same issue still, no matter when you do the training, no matter how frequently you do the training, it's not in their wheelhouse really. And if you figure, if you've been at this long enough, in the beginnings, software changed every couple of years. Microsoft would come out with a new iteration a year or two, and now things change weekly. So we expect our engineers and our test engineers to keep up on what they need to know, and then throwing a whole new framework like security on top of it, it's very difficult. So we still wind up, no matter how hard we try and we train our security engineers, test engineers, or software engineers, test engineers, the dev community, they're still doing essentially the same thing. They're testing what they can, they toss it over the fence to InfoSec or AppSec, and maybe it gets dealt with. So again, the problem here, got ahead of myself a little bit, sorry. So the problem is you're relying on security resources to test everything, and they're a scarce resource. Again, developers not working in their wheelhouse. So what you wind up with there is when you ask developers to do this kind of work and you aren't, and you're trying to train them, but it's not in their day-to-day, what you wind up with is increased variability. Some teams are better at security than others. Some engineers are better at security than others, both out of, it could be just out of desire. It's not in their wheelhouse. They don't want to deal with it. Or it's just tough to learn. So what we decided on was to introduce this risk advisory framework, and I call it pseudo-automated. It's not 100% automated. There's still a piece that the engineers and test engineers have to deal with. But what we came up with was this idea of having teams do risk assessment on what they're creating on a per story basis for stories in their upcoming sprints. So the way that teams, at least in the Agile framework, which is what we deal with, the way that they build out is they break out everything that they have to work on into stories. And so this way they don't have to know about the security. They just have to know what's in their story. So what we created was this standard interview process. It ties into our project management system. We happen to use Jira. So what this system does is it pulls all the stories into in their upcoming sprint, any future sprints, current sprint, into our interview application. And our test engineers, software engineers, product owners, team leads, they can run each story through the interview process. And all the interview is doing, it's not asking them anything about security. All it's doing is asking them what is in the story. So based on the answers in the interview, we create tasks and assign that to the story, or assign those tasks to the story. And those tasks provide all the security knowledge that whoever is going to work on the story will need. And we add tags to the stories so that we can automate reporting. But the big thing here is now they don't have to rely on that periodic training if they get it at all. They don't have to think back to what they may have learned in terms of security and try and apply it. We're kind of walking them down the path. So by doing that, There's no more spelunking the wiki. They don't have to spelunk the internet, based on what it is they're creating and how, which security pieces to apply. And then some of the stuff that we added to this based on requests was the ability to skip an interview. So maybe you have a story that you don't need to do the interview on, but we still want to record that it was looked at. And we added a feature for our dev community to basically request a penetration test from our security team on a feature that they're creating directly through this application. And they can also, if they aren't sure about what they need to do for security, they can ask for a risk advisory. So what this really gets us is it gets us standardization. By not having to focus on the day-to-day security requirements, our dev teams, they can do what they need to do, and by using our tool, we get a standard response regarding security, regardless of their interest and regardless of their abilities in terms of security. We also are able to provide security in an engineering context, and this is really important. For those of you who remember the show Office Space, remember the guy Bob, who his whole job was to translate the specifications and deal with the customer so the engineers didn't have to. That's kind of the approach here in security in an engineering context. So we allow the engineering community, our dev community, to work in the way that they typically work, don't have to think about security at all, and we do the translation for them. And the last piece of this, which is probably the most important, and it's really kind of a central mantra to DevSecOps, is we allow security and the delivery of customer value at the same time. So what we're trying to do is provide a mechanism for our engineering teams to add security without getting in the way of their ability to provide customer value. So where this fits in the Agile model, here at the top, I have the traditional model where it's, start sprint, sprint planning, grooming, pointing, close the sprint, and do a retro. And the shift left Agile model is basically inserting risk advisory. Or our idea is to insert risk advisory into right after planning and right before grooming. And those two can really be flipped if need be. It doesn't really matter. And the one thing I will say is this is kind of a substitute to threat modeling. So we look at it as adding value that we don't typically get at this level from threat modeling. So, and lastly, this slide really shows that I have absolutely no ability to do anything artistic. So let's show the app. I'm gonna switch screens here. So let me try and stop sharing. Okay, and reshare. Okay, so keeping in mind that this is very much a proof of concept, this is my risk advisory framework, and I can start. This is connected to our Jira system, so I have a test project in Jira. You'll notice here this grabs the 4 tickets in our Jira system, gives me the name of that, or the key for the ticket, gives me the summary, the description, the labels, basic pertinent information. The meat of this is the interview. And the interview, you can see here I have some sections: inputs, outputs, server and API, and build information. This is what I've gotten to so far. So you can see in here, there is nothing about security in these questions. Or I should say, it's not in security speak. It's just simply asking, what does your story have? So think of it as kind of engineering go fish, right? So based on the answers, I'm not going to go ahead. I'm not going to post this, but because I already have a result I can show. But before I get to that, I want to show, I can also skip the interview. So why I would want to skip the interview. Maybe it's a test story only, maybe it's a spike, maybe it's already covered, so I don't need to do it again. Maybe it's database only or for some other reason. And we just want to record that this process was used, but we're going to skip the interview for this story. And then here are the pen test request, simple, and request risk advisory, again, simple. And you can see here with the labels, I've already done one of each of these. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to click view ticket because I already have it open. But this is what the ticket looks like once it's processed. So you can see here on this ticket, it created 2 subtasks for the risk advisory framework, one for the input security and remediation for cross-site scripting and the other for data sensitivity. And it also tells me who added it down here in the comments. And if I want to take a look at the individual subtask, well, before I do that, this is what it looks like on the board. So I can see I have my 2 subtasks here for the story. Those subtasks need to be completed in order for the story to be complete. And I can look at the subtask itself, and you can see here I've provided links to our wiki to take our engineers directly to the information they need. And we can take a look at what this looks like. So here I have all of the pertinent information on how to sanitize against cross-site scripting, why you want to do it, 5-minute version, all the OWASP information, any recommendations, and how to test it. We do have videos elsewhere. I didn't put them in here. But that is pretty much the application. This has been a very interesting experience for me. It's the first time I've done a React app and a .NET Core API by myself in God knows how long. And I also want to do a serious shout out to our UI UX team at Paylocity because they are responsible for this entire layout, which absolutely rocks. They really make it easy. That is it. That's all I've got. Anyone with any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Great. Any questions? Nothing coming in on YouTube. Anything in 8x8?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead.
Hey, any chance, Bruce, that this would get open sourced, or have you open sourced it already?
Funny you should ask. Yes, my hope is that we will open source this. We've designed it, or I should say I designed it initially in such a way that I want to open source it. I am hoping that the powers that be within my employer will allow us to open source it. I think there are other things we've talked about open sourcing, so it's likely. I don't know when that would happen, though.
Very cool. Well, nice work. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Bruce.
Yep.
That concludes our talks for tonight. Before we go, I do wanted to do a couple of quick pitches because I forgot to do them earlier. Don't forget to check out our job board where you can post jobs. You can see some jobs that we've got there. I think we're up to like 16 or 17 jobs up on there. And then one of them, I think, is one of them actually has several inside of it. So go check them out. There's mostly development jobs. I think there's a couple design jobs and maybe a technical writing job on there. There's some really cool opportunities on there. We are, of course, supported by your memberships, ranging from $10 to $150 a month, depending on if you want access to the co-working space at the higher end of things, or if you just want to make sure that we're able to pay the bills. Especially important now during the pandemic, as many of our co-working members have dropped because they're not able to use the space right now, and they'd like to save some money too. So if I think I calculated it out that if we could get 100 people to give us $10, then our entire, well, not our entire, but a good chunk of the money that we've lost because of the pandemic would be back, and that would really help us out. Lastly, we have some merch, another way to help support us. We've got some really cool stuff from artifacts and some abstraction stuff on there. All kinds of cool stuff to keep you warm in the cooling months. I know I've got this artifacts cap that I've been wearing around the house every now and then, especially as it is a little bit chilly in my house in the morning, and then a neck gaiter to keep your neck warm. You might not necessarily want to use this as a face mask, although it may be okay. But it certainly is a cool thing to wear, or I should say a warm thing to wear on a cool Pittsburgh morning or wherever you are. Some of my friends and coworkers up in Minneapolis have been very cold these past few days as they've had some significant snow. I think that's about it that I've got. Keep your eyes peeled on the Code and Supply Slack community, as well as on Twitter and YouTube and a variety of other places where you maybe have seen our messaging and seen announcements for content like this, especially on meetup.com as well. So thank you very much for joining us, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your evening and a great next few weeks. Cheers.